Welcome to What Matters Most with life coach Dieter Pauwels, and we've been talking about the book Don Miguel Ruiz. It's called The Four Agreements, and today we're talking about don't make assumptions. That is the third agreement.
That is the third agreement.
So don't assume anything. You have a little problem with this, don't you?
I have a problem with it. I don't think it's realistic because we're always going to make assumptions. It's part of life. People are meaning makers. We're always going to make meaning out of our life's experiences. We've been doing this since we were, 3 years old. We will continue to do this for the rest of our lives. So that's where I have the issue. When you tell people not to make assumptions, it's like to tell people stop breathing. It's not going to happen.
Right. I think what he talks about too, don't you think, Dieter, is that when you make assumptions about what you assume the other person is thinking, that becomes sort of a magical thinking thing on your part, and then you base all of your reactions or what you think on something that may not even exist because you're making an assumption.
Correct. Yeah. So I agree that assumptions are at the core of a lot of hurt and problems in our lives. Maybe not the assumption, but the personal attachment to the assumption, because what happens, we think it's true.
Right.
We start behaving as if that assumption is true, and sometimes we start defending these assumptions, we start putting people down based on the assumptions and so forth. That's what's creating the drama. But I think we're always going to make assumptions.
Well, there have always been a lot of great breakthroughs in history because people have gone on to make assumptions that they could actually get this done, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you mentioned that JFK was one of those.
If JFK said we're going to put a man on the moon, don't you think he was making some bold, uncommon assumptions? Mm-hmm. If Henry Ford, his assumption was not we need faster horses, he wanted to have, he was going to have the cars and so forth. So in order to make breakthroughs in life, I believe we need to make some uncommon assumptions so we can start perceiving things from a different point of view, not just technologically or scientifically, but also in our personal lives.
Right, but do you think that that in the book he doesn't really talk about science? Because in science, aren't you always making assumptions that you can get to the next level by doing this sort of research? Isn't that where the assumptions kind of apply?
I think what he's probably meaning to say, Christine, is that he's talking about the assumptions as it relates to our personal relationships. Because when we make assumptions, more often than not, it is a negative for us. We put ourselves down, we put other people down. Mm-hmm. And that's what he's saying. So he's actually implying the first agreement, be impeccable with your word. He's implying the second agreement, don't take things personal. But I still think that for people to create breakthroughs in their own lives, we have to make assumptions. Why? Because whatever happens in your life, the drama in your life, if you had drama in your life, you don't have drama in your life. Some people do, and so the drama always happens within the framework of meaning, within the framework of assumptions. So if we create a bigger framework for people, if we change the assumption of what is possible, we can create breakthroughs in our lives.
So you're saying you better assume that you can do it, otherwise you'll never really try.
That's a difference. Right. So if we create a different framework of what is possible, suddenly we can step into a world of possibility and not a world of scarcity. Some people think that life is about winning or losing. What if you assume that life is about making a contribution? That would make a huge paradigm shift for many people.
Okay, you make a good point.
Right.
The author also.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. The author also says that people make assumptions because they're afraid to ask questions. Now, this couldn't be even. I mean, if you look at the situation with Shirley Sherrod recently, who had to end up losing her job because she was making a speech about race and something that happened to her some 24 years ago, but her comments were taken out of context, and people assumed that the rest of the speech was going to be so-called racist. Now, that was a huge assumption. If someone had stopped to ask the question, what's the rest of the speech?
That is a wonderful example, Christine, so thanks for bringing that up. Another point here is that when we don't have all the facts, mm-hmm. we as human beings, we're going to fill in the blanks. We always do. We're going to make up our own story. So the story was here that she's a racist, because we're going to start filling in the blanks based on the tidbits of information, mm-hmm. what we have seen. And this is unfortunate in news today, is that we just give tidbits of information, it's taken out of context.
Yeah, that someone just lifts that and then makes a big
People watch
thing out of it.
They fill it in with their framework of assumptions, and there we go.
Right. I know another thing that he talked about in terms of personal relationships with people is that people assume that they can change someone. They get into a relationship and it may not be copacetic, it may not be working, but they think they assume that they'll change that person. He says that in the book.
I agree. We expect people to behave a certain way, right. Again, based on our own assumptions. Mm-hmm. So here's what I'm saying. Instead of saying no assumptions, the new agreement would be make better assumptions. First, make better assumptions. First, understand that you will be making assumptions. deal with it.
Okay.
Second, become aware of the hidden assumptions that you are making,
Okay.
the blind spots. And third, make better assumptions based on the things that you really want in your life.
Dear Mr. Ruiz, this is what Dieter thinks changed the third agreement. I think that you have some really worthy points. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next Friday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Still ahead at noon.